One of the quiet struggles intelligent people face is not complexity. It is stupidity. Not occasional mistakes, not ignorance that can be corrected, but persistent irrationality, the kind that refuses logic, rejects evidence, and reacts emotionally to reason. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that this conflict between intelligence and foolishness is one of the most frustrating experiences in human life, because intelligence seeks clarity, but stupidity resists it. And when these two forces meet, conflict often follows. Imagine explaining something obvious, something supported by facts, yet the other person refuses to listen. They interrupt, they misunderstand, they twist the argument, or they become emotional instead of rational. At first, the intelligent person assumes the problem is communication. Maybe the explanation was unclear. Maybe the other person needs more time. So they try again. More examples, more evidence, more patience. But eventually, something becomes clear. The problem is not the explanation. The problem is the mind receiving it. Schopenhauer wrote that arguing with foolish people is like trying to wake someone who pretends to be asleep. No matter how clear the truth becomes, they resist it. Not because they cannot understand, but because accepting it would require humility. And humility is difficult for the ego. This is why intelligent people often experience a particular kind of exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion. The exhaustion of repeating obvious truths, of watching the same mistakes happen again and again, of explaining simple ideas to people who refuse to hear them. But Schopenhauer offered a harsh observation. Most people are not interested in truth. They are interested in protecting their beliefs, and protecting beliefs is easier than changing them. Now consider the consequences of this reality. If an intelligent person tries to correct every foolish idea they encounter, they will spend their entire life arguing. Every conversation becomes a debate. Every disagreement becomes a battle, and the mind becomes constantly irritated. Schopenhauer believed this was a mistake, because the goal of intelligence is not constant correction. The goal is clarity, and clarity sometimes means recognizing when explanation is useless. Not every mind is open to reason. Some people prefer comfort over truth, and when comfort conflicts with logic, comfort usually wins. Understanding this changes how intelligent people approach conversation. Instead of assuming every disagreement must be resolved, they begin observing. They ask themselves a simple question: is this person capable of understanding reason? If the answer is yes, discussion is worthwhile. If the answer is no, discussion becomes pointless. This realization is liberating, because it removes the need to win every argument. Schopenhauer often warned that intelligent people suffer when they expect rational behavior from irrational minds. It is like expecting discipline from chaos, or wisdom from ignorance. Once you stop expecting intelligence everywhere, your frustration decreases. Instead of arguing endlessly, you become selective. You choose carefully where to invest your energy, because mental energy is limited, and wasting it on pointless arguments is one of the fastest ways to drain it. Now imagine observing conversations differently. Someone expresses a foolish opinion. Instead of reacting emotionally, you evaluate the situation. Is this person curious? Do they listen? Do they ask questions? If the answer is yes, discussion may lead somewhere meaningful. But if they interrupt constantly, dismiss evidence, or become defensive immediately, then you are not dealing with curiosity. You are dealing with ego, and ego rarely accepts correction. Schopenhauer understood that many arguments are not intellectual exchanges. They are emotional defenses, each person trying to protect their identity. In such situations, logic becomes irrelevant, because logic cannot penetrate emotional armor. This is why intelligent individuals often appear quiet in group conversations, not because they have nothing to say, because they recognize when speaking is pointless. Silence becomes strategy. They listen, observe, and speak only when discussion has potential. This restraint is often misunderstood. Others may assume the quiet person lacks confidence, but in reality, the quiet person simply recognizes something important. Not every battle deserves participation. Now consider the long-term effect of this mindset. Instead of becoming irritated by foolish behavior, you begin expecting it. Human nature becomes predictable, and predictability reduces frustration. You stop trying to change everyone. Instead, you focus on understanding them. Understanding removes emotional tension. You begin to see people as they are, not as you wish they were. And once you reach that level of clarity, something changes inside your mind. Foolish behavior stops feeling personal. It simply becomes another example of human nature. And once it stops feeling personal, the irritation fades. This is the first lesson Schopenhauer offers to intelligent minds. Not every disagreement deserves your attention. Not every person deserves your explanation. Sometimes the wisest response is simply recognizing when reason has reached its limit and quietly moving on. One of the most important lessons Arthur Schopenhauer emphasized is that arguing with foolish people rarely produces truth. It produces noise. At first, intelligent people believe that clear reasoning will eventually win, if the facts are strong enough, if the explanation is patient enough, if the logic is obvious enough. Surely the other person will eventually understand. But Schopenhauer believed this expectation is naive, because many arguments are not about truth. They are about ego. When a person feels their belief is threatened, their mind does not calmly evaluate evidence. Instead, it becomes defensive. They interrupt. They distort the argument. They ignore evidence. Or they attack the person instead of the idea. At that moment, the discussion stops being intellectual. It becomes psychological. And once ego enters the conversation, logic becomes almost useless. The foolish person is no longer trying to understand. They are trying to protect themselves. Schopenhauer warned that continuing to argue in this situation is a mistake, because the longer the argument continues, the more the intelligent person appears emotionally invested, and emotional investment can make even the smartest individual look foolish. Imagine two people arguing loudly in public. One person is clearly wrong, but both are shouting. Both are reacting emotionally. To an outside observer, the difference between them becomes blurred. The intelligent person loses the advantage of composure. This is why Schopenhauer believed silence can be a powerful response. Silence communicates something that endless argument cannot. Confidence. A calm refusal to participate in irrational conflict. When you stop arguing, you remove the stage, and without an audience, many foolish arguments collapse. Now consider something interesting about human psychology. Foolish people often speak more than intelligent ones, not because they have more knowledge, because they feel less doubt. Doubt is a sign of reflection. The intelligent mind constantly questions itself. Am I correct? Is there something I missed? Is there another perspective? This internal questioning creates caution, but the foolish mind experiences less hesitation. It believes strongly in its own conclusions, even when those conclusions are incorrect. This creates a strange illusion. The confident fool appears certain. The thoughtful thinker appears reserved, and in many social situations, certainty is mistaken for intelligence. Schopenhauer understood this paradox well. He warned that people who speak loudly and confidently often receive attention, but attention is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom often speaks quietly, sometimes it remains silent entirely. Now imagine an intelligent person encountering someone who refuses to listen. The foolish person becomes louder, more emotional, more aggressive. If the intelligent person continues engaging, they enter the same emotional rhythm. The conversation becomes chaotic. But if the intelligent person pauses, remains calm, or simply withdraws, the dynamic changes immediately. The foolish person may continue speaking, but without resistance, their words lose impact, because argument requires opposition. Without opposition, noise fades. This does not mean intelligent people should never speak. It means they should choose their moments carefully. Schopenhauer believed that conversation should resemble a thoughtful exchange, not a battlefield. If someone demonstrates curiosity, discussion becomes meaningful. If someone demonstrates arrogance, discussion becomes pointless. Recognizing the difference saves enormous mental energy. Now consider another mistake intelligent people often make. They assume that presenting more information will solve the problem. More statistics, more examples, more explanations, but information cannot overcome stubbornness. Someone determined to reject truth will always find a way to do so. They will question the source, dismiss the evidence, or change the topic entirely. Schopenhauer observed that foolish minds often rely on distraction. When logic cornered them, they shift the argument. They bring up unrelated issues. They attack character. They change the subject. These tactics protect their ego from admitting error. And the intelligent person who continues chasing every new argument becomes trapped. The discussion never ends, because the goal was never understanding. It was resistance. Now imagine recognizing this pattern instantly. Instead of becoming frustrated, you simply observe. You recognize the signs of intellectual dishonesty, interruptions, deflections, emotional reactions. At that moment, you make a decision. You stop investing energy. You allow the conversation to end naturally. Not because you lost, because the game was never worth playing. Schopenhauer believed that preserving mental peace is more valuable than winning pointless arguments. The intelligent mind has better uses for its energy. Learning, thinking, creating, reflecting, arguing endlessly with irrational people wastes that energy, and wasted energy produces nothing of value. This is why many intelligent individuals become quieter with age. Experience teaches them a difficult lesson. Not every conversation deserves their voice. Sometimes silence communicates wisdom more clearly than words. When you stop arguing with foolish people, something interesting happens. Your mind becomes calmer, your focus becomes sharper, and the world feels less exhausting because you have removed yourself from endless intellectual battles that were never meant to be won. This is the second lesson Schopenhauer offers. The goal of intelligence is not constant debate. The goal is clarity, and clarity often means knowing when to walk away. One uncomfortable truth that Arthur Schopenhauer spoke about openly is this: intelligence does not always attract admiration. Sometimes it attracts resentment. This may seem strange at first. You might assume that people respect intelligence naturally. But human psychology is more complicated than that. When someone encounters a person who is more disciplined, more thoughtful, or more intellectually capable, something subtle happens inside the mind. Comparison begins, and comparison can create discomfort. If someone values growth, that discomfort becomes motivation. They observe the intelligent person and think, what can I learn from them? But if someone is insecure, the same comparison creates a different reaction. Instead of curiosity, they feel threatened. Your intelligence becomes a mirror reflecting their weaknesses. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your calm reasoning exposes their impulsiveness, and that exposure can create silent resentment. Schopenhauer believed this reaction explains why intelligent people often experience hostility even when they behave respectfully. The hostility is not always about what they said. It is about what they represent. Competence, discipline, insight. These qualities challenge the ego of those who lack them, and when the ego feels threatened, it searches for ways to restore balance. Sometimes that balance appears as mockery. Someone may dismiss intelligence as overthinking, or they may say things like, "You think too much. You're trying to sound smart. You always complicate everything." These comments often reveal insecurity more than criticism, because thoughtful thinking rarely threatens confident people. It threatens those who feel intellectually vulnerable. Now consider something Schopenhauer observed frequently. Many foolish individuals cope with insecurity by forming groups. Groups create comfort. If many people share the same flawed opinion, it feels safer. Challenging that opinion becomes difficult because disagreement no longer feels like a discussion. It feels like confrontation. An intelligent individual entering such a group may quickly notice resistance, not because their ideas are wrong, but because their ideas disrupt the emotional harmony of the group. People may respond with laughter, sarcasm, dismissal, not because they carefully evaluated the idea, but because rejecting it protects the group's comfort. This dynamic explains why intelligence often thrives in solitude, not because intelligent people hate others, but because deep thinking requires space, and space becomes rare in environments dominated by shallow conversation. Schopenhauer himself spent long periods in solitude, not because he disliked society entirely, but because he recognized how exhausting constant foolishness could become. Solitude offered clarity, freedom from endless arguments, freedom from intellectual noise. Now imagine an intelligent person surrounded by constant, irrational behavior. At first, they try to help. They explain patiently. They offer thoughtful perspectives. But if their efforts are consistently rejected, something changes. They begin withdrawing, not out of arrogance, out of self-preservation. Mental energy is limited, and intelligent minds learn quickly that wasting energy on stubborn ignorance is pointless. Instead, they redirect their attention toward reading, learning, reflection, creative thinking, environments where ideas are respected. This shift is often misunderstood. Others may accuse the intelligent person of being distant or antisocial, but in reality, the intelligent person has simply learned an important lesson. Not everyone values thoughtful discussion, and forcing it creates unnecessary frustration. Schopenhauer believed that intelligent people must develop a certain emotional distance from foolish behavior. Without that distance, irritation becomes constant. Every conversation becomes a potential argument. Every interaction becomes draining. Distance restores peace. It allows the intelligent person to observe human behavior without becoming emotionally entangled in it. Now consider the psychological advantage this creates. When you stop trying to correct everyone, you become calmer. When you stop expecting intelligence everywhere, disappointment disappears. You begin accepting people as they are. Some thoughtful, some impulsive, some curious, some stubborn. And once you accept this diversity of minds, something changes. Your emotional reaction softens. Instead of becoming angry at foolish behavior, you simply recognize it. Like recognizing bad weather, you do not argue with rain, you simply adjust your plans. Schopenhauer believed this mindset protects the intelligent mind from unnecessary suffering. Because the greatest frustration comes from unrealistic expectations. Expecting wisdom from foolish people guarantees disappointment. But expecting foolishness makes the world easier to navigate. Now imagine encountering someone stubbornly wrong about something obvious. In the past, you might have argued intensely, trying to prove the truth. Now you simply observe. You notice their refusal to listen, their defensive tone, their resistance to logic, and instead of feeling anger, you feel clarity. This conversation will not lead anywhere, so you disengage calmly. Your peace remains intact. This is the third lesson Schopenhauer offers. Intelligence must be paired with emotional discipline. Otherwise, the intelligent mind becomes trapped in endless frustration, not because the world lacks reason, but because reason is unevenly distributed. And once you understand that reality, something changes inside your mind. You stop fighting every foolish idea. You start protecting your mental peace. And protecting that peace becomes far more valuable than winning any argument. As intelligent people mature, their relationship with society changes. When they are young, they often believe they must challenge every incorrect idea, every flawed argument, every careless opinion. They feel a responsibility to correct the world, but experience slowly teaches them something different. The world does not always want correction, and forcing wisdom on unwilling minds only creates frustration. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this reality deeply. He believed that intelligent individuals eventually learn the value of mental independence. Mental independence means something simple but powerful. Your peace does not depend on the intelligence of others. This realization frees the mind from constant irritation, because once you stop expecting rational behavior everywhere, foolishness stops feeling shocking. It simply becomes predictable, and predictability removes emotional tension. Now consider something interesting about highly intelligent people. They often develop a greater appreciation for solitude, not loneliness, solitude. The difference is important. Loneliness feels like absence. Solitude feels like freedom. Freedom from noise, freedom from constant argument, freedom from the mental chaos created by shallow conversation. Schopenhauer believed that solitude allows the intelligent mind to expand, because deep thinking requires silence, and silence rarely exists in environments filled with endless opinion and debate. When an intelligent person spends time alone, their thoughts become clearer, ideas develop without interruption, creativity grows, understanding deepens. But society often misunderstands this preference for solitude. Some people assume that quiet individuals are antisocial or arrogant, but often the opposite is true. The intelligent person simply values meaningful interaction more than constant interaction. They prefer one thoughtful conversation over 10 shallow ones, quality over quantity. This mindset changes how they approach relationships as well. Instead of surrounding themselves with many people, they become selective. They seek individuals who value curiosity, honesty, reflection, people who enjoy exploring ideas rather than defending beliefs. Because conversations with such people energize the mind instead of draining it. Now consider the emotional advantage of this approach. When you surround yourself with thoughtful individuals, discussions become productive. Disagreements become learning opportunities rather than ego battles. Ideas evolve instead of stagnating. But when you spend too much time around stubborn foolishness, the opposite happens. Conversations become repetitive, arguments become emotional, and intellectual progress slows. Schopenhauer believed intelligent individuals must protect their mental environment carefully. Just as you protect your physical health, you must protect your intellectual atmosphere, because the people you interact with influence how your mind functions. Constant exposure to shallow thinking can exhaust even the sharpest mind, but thoughtful company sharpens it. Now let us return to the core challenge. How do intelligent people deal with foolish people without becoming frustrated? Schopenhauer offered a simple answer: acceptance, not approval. Acceptance. Acceptance means recognizing reality without fighting it constantly. Some people value truth, others value comfort. Some people question their beliefs, others defend them stubbornly. This diversity of minds will always exist. Once you accept that reality, your emotional response softens. Instead of expecting everyone to think deeply, you recognize that many people simply will not. And once you accept that, your frustration fades. You stop trying to fix every mind you encounter. Instead, you focus on developing your own. This shift creates inner stability, because your peace no longer depends on convincing others. Your peace depends on your own clarity. Now imagine encountering foolish behavior with this mindset. Someone expresses a poorly reasoned opinion. You observe calmly. You evaluate whether discussion is worthwhile. If curiosity exists, you engage. If stubbornness dominates, you disengage. No anger, no frustration, just clarity. This approach protects your mental energy. And mental energy is one of the most valuable resources an intelligent person possesses, because intelligence thrives when it is focused, not when it is scattered across endless arguments. Schopenhauer believed that the wisest individuals eventually reach a quiet understanding. You cannot eliminate foolishness from the world, but you can prevent it from disturbing your peace. You do this through awareness, through patience, through selective engagement, and through the confidence to walk away from pointless debate. This is not weakness, it is discipline. The discipline to invest your mind where it matters. And when you develop that discipline, something remarkable happens. Life becomes less irritating, conversations become more meaningful, and your mind becomes calmer, because you are no longer fighting human nature. You are simply understanding it. This is the final lesson Schopenhauer offers to intelligent minds. True intelligence is not measured by how many arguments you win. It is measured by how peacefully you navigate a world where many people do not value reason. And once you learn to navigate that world calmly, foolishness loses its power to disturb you. Your mind remains clear, focused, and free. 333.